I'd like to start by introducing the new special advisor to New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo, specifically for the reopening of the Finger Lakes, Bob Duffy. Welcome, Bob.
Oh, thank you, Sarah.
So, Bob, you want to tell us a little bit about the reopening? I know people have a general sense, and we've been watching the news, and the governor's been doing a great job of keeping people informed. But obviously, we've got phases, and tell us what phase are we in now, and who's included in that phase, and what can we look for in the future?
Well, we're in phase one right now, which really involves construction, manufacturing, light retail. And the governor has really made a number of adjustments and changes each week. Vinny Esposito is on the line with us. He'll be joining in a moment. But a little background, contrary to some public opinion, my position is voluntary. I was asked to be a voluntary advisor to the governor and also to, I guess, the rank of captain of the control room, which we can explain in a minute. Our job, my job here at the chamber in this role has been to talk to businesses, which we've done. We've had countless meetings like this. We listen. We've taken in plans. We really recommended businesses to put their plans together, always with at least 4 components, and that is face coverings, hand sanitizing, social distancing, and disinfecting, among other things. And there's more complexities to that. We constantly send these plans, suggestions, and pieces of feedback to the governor's team. He has a world-class group of analytics experts down there. They go through this voluminous information, and he comes out really almost week by week with announcements. Quickly, the control room, which he put in place maybe 3 weeks ago, myself and Vinny Esposito really co-lead that. On that is a county executive, the mayor, Dr. Mendoza, and leaders of 8 surrounding counties and our 2 hospital systems. The control room, again, is not a decision maker, but if the issues of hospitalization, infection rates go up, then we have to recommend measures to try and tamper that and bring those back down. And the whole point with the reopenings, and as Vinny will tell you as well, we are on calls every day with our hospitals. The governor is on point with new hospitalizations, with hospital capacity, with testing. Hospital capacity does not want to get overwhelmed, so trying to keep the infection rates down. We hit the metrics to open with phase one. We were very, very close once we opened because we had a couple of spikes. We had 2 spikes, one in Monroe County, one in Ontario County, primarily in the nursing home area. But you're also seeing a huge increase in testing. And I think we are testing at a rate I've never seen before. Both systems, Monroe Community College has a drive-through testing area. And with that, you'll see more infections. But phase 2, the governor said, at least, in keywords, knowing the governor as I do, at least is key to understand, 2 weeks between phases. He is going to probably have an announcement sometime this week about phase 2, what will be in there. What we've heard so far, really publicly, is the fact that hair salons are in there. There's a lot of questions in terms of will be other things. In many cases, I think Vinny and I will both tell you, we don't know yet. The governor, when he makes his announcement, they'll come out and they'll post regulations on a website, which we'll share with everybody here. And we try and provide the most up-to-date information. And we understand the pain. We understand the concerns that people have. Business owners are fearful. Employees going back are fearful. We get all sides coming in, but we really, I don't make judgments. We just try and listen to everybody and make sure we get everybody's information as best we can to the governor's team as they make their decisions. So maybe I'll stop there, and if Vinny wants to jump in.
Sarah, you're on mute. You want me to jump in?
Hang on, let me jump in. Sorry about that, I muted myself. This is Sarah Lentini again. I wanted just to introduce Vinny Esposito. Vinny is the regional director for the regional office, the Finger Lakes Regional Office of Empire State Development, which serves as the state's economic development arm. So I'm trying to find Vinny so that I can put him on camera, but welcome, Vinny.
I'm here.
I'll find you in a
Thank
minute
you,
and I'll get you in the center.
All right, I appreciate that. It's a pleasure to be invited to be with you and so many of your members today. And of course with Bob, who I'm very grateful for all of the volunteer assignments he keeps on taking from the governor. They are considerable and they're very challenging, but he always does it with the typical grace and leadership that he brings to our community. So that's appreciated. The first thing I'll say is the information we're going to talk about today, the best resource to follow up any of it is the website that Bob was referencing, which is forward.ny.gov. There are some incredible resources on that website that have a lot more detail than Bob and I have memorized, and there'll be things that you can follow up with after today's call or during while we're going through it. Everything from what are the outlines of the phases to what are the regional health metrics that Bob was referencing that we're all looking at very closely to make sure that we're addressing the spread of the virus before we reopen the economy too quickly, to all of the resources for loan programs and different types of guidance and documents that are available on the EFT website as well as the governor's website. So, Bob sort of laid out in broad strokes how we're going about this. The pandemic caught a lot of people, I wouldn't say by surprise, but in terms of how we had to shut down society and the economy, it was something that was very drastic. We are trying to be much more thoughtful about reopening. That's why you see a plan from Governor Cuomo. This isn't being done willy-nilly. New York Forward is the name of the plan on how to reopen the economy safely in phases by analyzing and using the data to determine what are the industry sectors that bring the greatest economic value to our economy and also provide the least amount of risk for continuing to expose people or transmit the virus so that we can continue to reopen the economy without going backwards. To do it in that manner is something that's relatively unique to New York State, certainly the sort of rigor to which we're doing this in a planned way. And that's what Bob and I, our role is to oversee in the Rochester region, the Finger Lakes region, as the state calls it, is to make sure that we're doing this. We're not hitting any roadblocks or hiccups that are going to set us back. And we're doing this, continue to do this very thoughtfully. So, I guess the best thing to do is really to get to questions, the things that are specific. Bob laid out the broad strokes about what is in phase one. All along, many of you know there have been a lot of essential business functions that have been allowed to operate, sometimes with restrictions. But from the beginning of this, recognizing that there are some things in our economy that you simply can't shut down to be able to respond to the pandemic and allow people to live, provide shelter, food, all of the things that everybody needs. So there are several details related to all of those phase one essential businesses. They're constantly changing. Just yesterday, things changed on the statewide essential business guidance to allow for campgrounds and veterinary services to occur. So it's difficult to stay on top of it when you are doing this all day, every day, like Bob and I are. And I'm sure that you are confused or have some questions about some of those things, and that's what we're here to talk about today.
Terrific. And Vinny, you may have addressed this. I apologize if I missed it because I've got some folks that are reaching out to me just to try to get into the meeting. This is Sarah Lentini from the Greece Regional Chamber again, but we had a lot of folks who were registering for the meeting who had questions specific to hair salons. So they were asking about hair salons, and a lot of times hair salons are, also do nails. And there are also people that work on eyelashes, people that work on waxing, potentially massage, spas, all of the different spa services. So they were asking, are they all sort of being treated as one thing, one set of services for the purpose of reopening? When might they be considered for reopening, and how should they be operating? Because they're obviously in a very private space much of the time with their customers.
Yeah, there's no question. The number one question that has come into all of us over the last month on reopening is, when can I get my hair cut? I'm not exaggerating. It's not even close. So last week, the governor announced that hair salons and barbershops will be part of phase two. So that much we know. We don't know when phase two will start. Could be as early as Friday. And we don't know any more details about the other services that you just listed off that a lot of salons provide yet. If you saw how phase one occurred, you saw that a few days before it started, the state published, again, on that forward.ny.gov website, specific safety guidelines for the industries that were allowed to reopen. That will happen again for all of the industries that are allowed to reopen for phase two. Could happen as soon as tomorrow or Thursday, but we just don't know yet the extent to which all of the services that businesses would provide in a hair salon setting can be offered. It would be my expectation that you probably won't be able to do every level of service, but you should be providing and preparing a safety plan to do all the services that you would want to perform when you are allowed to do so. That's the real takeaway from all of the conversations that Bob and I have with business groups. Prepare a safety plan now so that when the state does publish guidelines, you'll be ahead of the game. Maybe your plan is more stringent and more safe than what the state is requiring. Maybe it's not, and there are places you have to add in additional measures. But the thing you should be thinking of is how every service you offer can be done safely, and that's the most important thing. But we don't yet know the full level of everything from haircuts to massage, what will be allowed in phase 2.
Sarah, if I could add to that, I've not had a haircut in 3 months, so I'm also waiting for phase 2 to come for that. But to Vinny's point, I think our Greater Rochester Chambers probably had about 3,000 calls and emails on these issues about plans and openings. And what we urge everybody to do, as Vinny just said, is to check the website, look for those guidelines, which are very helpful. I mentioned 4 things earlier. But one thing to keep in mind, it is really there to protect employees and customers coming in. So the face coverings, the sanitizing, the distancing, it's going to be a very different experience getting your hair cut in the future, your hair done when you walk in, just given the pandemic. But the other side of that, which we have not really talked about much yet, even locally, is the issue of liability. Because I do believe that as all this unfolds, if somebody walks into a business, gets sick, God forbid is hospitalized, somebody loses a life, will there be litigation? We don't know to what extent that will happen. We sense there will be. Will there be a shield in New York State? I don't know if that would happen. If it did, there probably would be challenged in court. So it really is about taking some really good faith efforts to protect employees and customers. And I have to say this, for anybody listening out there, whether you are an employee or a business owner, again, we have really fielded really thousands of calls, emails, meetings. But I have to say there's a balance. There is a passion for businesses to get open again and get going because we understand the pain of no revenue for 2+ months is terrible. There's also a fear of people coming back to work, and not just because they might get paid more in unemployment, because once you offer a person a job to come back, they have to accept it or they lose it. But it really is a fear of coming back into a hair salon, a gym, of these things that we have to manage. And I think the more we do up front, as people not only have their plans, but display what those plans are and have these practices, I think it'll build up the confidence of people to come back because we want the economy back. We want it running again. Nobody wants it faster than the governor. The state has a 14+ billion with a B dollar budget gap so far. Every day, states, our state, our county, city, town governments, they're all losing money. Sales tax revenue, hotel, motel tax, a whole array of things. So we want that back. But as Vinny said, it's got to come back safely. The last thing we want to do is ever start to open, have a second wave come, and then it shuts down again.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Bob. We've got a number of questions that are coming up in the Zoom group chat that I want to make sure that both you and Vinny are aware of. And then I also need to go out and let somebody else come into the meeting. And so I'm going to turn the reins over to, I think I'll do Vinny with your permission. And here are some of the questions, because I'm not sure if you can see the chat questions. So one of them is, is dog grooming in phase 2? My dog is hurting. Another is we're having issues with employees being asked to return to work, but their kids need to attend online classes and their daycare won't do the classes with the kids. Any ideas? Another is we have a few dance studio owners from the Finger Lakes region on this call. Would you be able to clarify where dance studios would fall in regards to the phases? We've asked several agencies, but they don't seem to have an answer for us. And can you confirm that dance studios fall under, I don't even know what this means, Bob, 611650 fine arts schooling? There are other questions as well, but a lot about dance studios, and obviously the dog grooming one's a biggie too. So I'm going to
jump in, Sarah. I actually answered the dog grooming question in the chat for people who want to look. So animal care was always allowed as an essential business function statewide during the pandemic. But last week, we specified pet grooming as an allowable animal care service. Pet grooming, believe it or not, might have competed for the second most asked question. I was really surprised. I did not see that one coming. Maybe with golf course complaints. They were sort of competing neck and neck at one point for the second largest number of inquiries. But pet grooming is now allowed, as is all veterinary services. So that's something, again, those have been changes in the last week. So there are very good questions to ask. And so I've been answering them in the chat group as we've been going through. I'm sure, Sarah, what you were referencing with that number related to dance classes is what's called a NAICS code. So most industry sectors, for those of you who are business owners know, have a code that identifies the type of industry you're in. The forward.ny.gov website has a really great tool. We call it the Business Lookup Wizard that allows you to go in on the website, put in your NAICS code, your business, your address, so it knows what part of the state you're in, and it tells you if you are able to be open in the current phase for your region, and also points you to any restrictions or safety guidelines that you should be following. It's a really, really nice tool. It's updated every single day as things change. So you can always use that and promote that for people that have questions as to how we identify things. The one thing it doesn't do yet is it doesn't tell you what phase you might be in, because those things have not all been finalized, particularly when we get into things like youth sports, dance classes, some of the recreational or entertainment type activities that aren't the mass gatherings. They're likely going to be in phase 4, but we still don't know that yet. It wouldn't surprise me if some of those things got put into phase 3, while big things like football games for the Buffalo Bills remain in phase 4. But we just don't have that answer yet. It's why it's so important to stay in touch with this website, the governor's daily briefings, and all of the news that continue to unfold.
Vinny, if I could add to the information we send forward to the governor's team almost daily. The governor, at his discretion, can make these decisions in the middle of the week at any time. And we expect a phase 2 announcement this week. And with that will come regulations and what will be open. I think it'll probably stipulate if nails, waxing are involved. We don't know that yet. That's not been disclosed. But one of the things that business owners should know, we send plans, individual plans from businesses here in this region, national association plans. They all go to the governor's team. And there are people that are assigned to go through and really pick out best practices. So as these things unfold on a website that Vinny mentioned, you'll see guidelines set up, really are almost best practice national guidelines. So keep looking at those. You can all you can get a hold of either Vinny at any time. At the Greater Rochester Chamber of Commerce, hit the website, email me, Vinny, New York State, Empire State Development. If you have a question, we're happy to get back to you and try to get the best answer we can. But to reinforce, we don't get a heads up or advance notice on this. The governor makes his announcement when he's ready, but he makes it really based on the best available information, which we try and provide almost on a daily basis.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if Sarah's back, but there are some great questions coming in the chat group. So Sarah, I could address a couple of them.
Fantastic.
There are some industries that aren't listed. Really great point. That wizard tool is not perfect. Sometimes there are industries that really could be part of multiple phases. And it's important to note, if you have an industry or an enterprise where some of your items, some of your business functions, I should say, could happen under phase 2, but your full business can't open until phase 4, you're able to open the functions that apply to the phase that we're in at that time. So a big obvious example might be something like higher education. So a college is clearly phase 4 with bringing students back to campus, but in phase 2, administrative services, research and office functions will be able to open up. And so there are many organizations that fall into multiple phases. You really have to gauge it based on not just your NAICS code, which is one way to identify when you fit, but really the functions that are being performed. And then it gets into specific things too. There's a great question that may not have gone to everybody about, their business requires taking photographs of people and their faces. Do they have to wear a face covering? And those are examples where you're going to have to develop a plan for how you can take that photograph without a mask safely, so you have the appropriate physical distancing. So that's why all the safety guidelines are different for different business industries and functions. They're not all uniform, even though, as Bob says, they all have the same uniform components: physical distancing, face covering, disinfecting, monitoring. There are different practices associated with different industries for those basic elements. And that's what you need to continue to keep working on. So Sarah, I jumped in because I wasn't sure if you were back, but we can stop there, or I can keep going through some of the other chat questions, which are really, really good. There's a question there about 10 people that we should probably talk about.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And it was a question asked before this as well. So all the questions that have to do with aggregation, I think would be great to talk about what it is that's possible now, and what is likely under the best of circumstances to be a time when we could bring back together, larger groups of people. And of course, we recognize that these are almost impossible to answer in a way, because we're doing our best as an entire group of, a whole community of people, a whole state of New York, to try to make our way through what is a really, really horrible situation that we didn't see coming. And our health and safety has to come first. So, but if
Yeah,
you
nobody
could talk a
knows.
little bit about your process, that would be wonderful.
Nobody knows the answer to when large groups can happen. That is just too far out. That is the most challenging thing to do when you have a pandemic and a virus that's spreading through close personal contact. That being said, the 10-person question is a really good one because this is new. So last week, you probably saw the governor announce that religious services and Memorial Day celebrations, not celebrations, but commemorations, could have up to 10 people. On Friday night, that executive order was expanded to all gatherings. And so, showing that there are other types of gatherings where people can get together with less than 10 people, things like funeral services that were really difficult to restrict for the last few months. It's still a guideline. It is still that non-essential gatherings are discouraged. You should not be having them. And it does not mean that if your business operates typically with less than 10 people, but you are not in a reopening phase, that you can then reopen. This is still for what would be more essential gatherings, not non-essential gatherings or businesses that are not yet open in your phase. And so that's an important thing. Again, it's a change as of Friday, so it may change again in the near future, especially if our numbers continue to do better. But the short, big answer is getting large groups together is a more risky behavior, and we all need to be mindful about how and why we're doing it. Sarah, are you still with us?
Next question.
Yes, I am. I'm sorry. I was talking and I didn't realize I was muted. Yes, I'm still with you. I was going to say there's still more questions that are emerging in the chat box. A lot of great questions. And I wonder if you guys maybe just want to grab the questions, maybe alternating so that, not any one person.
Why don't I
is doing all the
grab the DMV one, Bob? I'll start because I know that one has a very specific answer. So DMVs will be reopened in this region starting June 6th for in-person appointment only. Obviously, there have been a lot of creative solutions happening during this, and the DMV is no exception. A lot of their services are being offered online. But the first time you'll be able to go into a DMV office, at least in Monroe County, I'm sure of, and I think it's pretty much standard statewide, even though some of those DMVs are county run, that June 6th will be the day for DMV services.
Did you guys talk at all about safety plans? I know there are other questions in the chat box, but one sort of overarching requirement is, as we understand it, of businesses is to have some sort of a safety plan in place before reopening. Is that correct? And if so, what does that consist of?
That is correct. Actually, the website, as Vinny mentioned, gives you great guidelines. Every business really has to have a plan by the time it reopens. I think Vinny mentioned before, even if you're not up for opening yet, be prepared for that. Those 4 areas we talk about should be just a foundation for that. The state will not inspect the plan before the business is open. But if there is a complaint, if you open up and say you have a hair salon opens up next week or week after in phase 2, and a customer comes in and complains, then there might be a local town or county official that would come. You're going to want to have that plan in place to show them. I think it protects the business to have it. It also, as I said earlier, it also really reinforces confidence in the customers. The template on the website is a great website. I think the state has done a great job putting information out. It's the most up-to-date information. It's a great guidance. But again, whatever your plan is, some areas take temperatures. Some construction sites will take a temperature of every worker. One construction company right now, a home builder, has one person assigned to every work crew whose sole responsibility is COVID-related issues, checking temperatures, face masks, safety equipment. It's protecting customers and employees, but it's doing it consistently. So it's a good faith effort. Again, face covering, social distancing, hand hygiene, and disinfecting. And make a point, hand hygiene does not mean you have to go out and buy expensive hand sanitizer. Soap and warm water, any doctor will tell you, works just as well or better than hand sanitizers.
Yeah, the thing I'll add on with regards to the safety plans, just to be very clear, because we had a lot of questions about this, especially a few weeks ago before it became clear what they were. Every business that's going to operate at any point needs to have a safety plan, but you do not have to submit it for approval. You need to have it. You need to eventually, when you're able to reopen, go on to the forward.ny.gov website and self-affirm that you've read the guidelines the state has posted and that your plan meets them, and that your plan will be posted in your place of business for your employees and customers to see. So it's really about doing the right thing, making sure you're adhering to the best practices, but you don't have to have it approved. And then I see some of the questions coming in are talking about, does this business need to wear a mask? Does this business need to take your temperature? There's no uniform answer to those questions. It depends on your business. And that's why the state is working with health experts to develop specific safety guidelines that are different for every industry, because construction is different than manufacturing, is different than a hair salon.
And add to Vinny's answer, I saw the last question pop up in the chat box. If you, the question was, I own a bookstore, and if I wear a mask, a customer walks in without a mask, what do I do? You as the owner have discretion. You do. And I know a lot of our large businesses, Wegmans, for example, suggest face coverings. They don't confront and throw you out. If you look around the country, there's been some pretty nasty encounters, some that end in some extreme violence about people not wanting to wear a mask. But it's up to a business owner if you want to serve somebody or not, coming in without it, as long as you are abiding by those guidelines. But I think by and large in this region, you'll see people abide by it, but there's no doubt you're going to have that encounter at some point.
Right. That's actually
and
great.
I'm also, sorry, I'm posting,
Go
just
ahead.
so everybody has it. There's also a really good resource with frequently asked questions on the website that is not as easy to find as some of the things and that I'm posting to the chat group. And those will be updated as some of these questions come in, because a lot of them, as you might imagine, are the same questions over and over.
Right. Yeah, you're right. There are a lot of repeat questions. The other area where we got several questions had to do with dentists and dental services. I apologize because I've been in and out, but is that something you've addressed?
We haven't addressed it yet, but it's a good question. We are getting it a lot, especially more and more as time goes by, because the essential business guidance, again, that has been operating statewide for this entire pandemic, has always allowed emergent dental care, right? And that's pretty much all it says, which is pretty vague when you start getting into the vagaries of, or the details of dental care. So right now, dentists have discretion about what they need to address. We think it may be part of phase 2, but again, that's not confirmed to be able to open up to all dental services. But as you can imagine, dentistry, as much as almost any other industry, has incredible risk exposure. And so safety guidelines are being developed for whenever dentistry is able to open up fully. But I think at this point, the things we've been talking to other dentists and even the large hospital systems with run some dental care is the medical professional, the dentist, should make the determination about what is emergent and what is urgent. A very simple condition that may not have been emergent or urgent in March when this all happened might have turned into something more serious by now. They have the discretion to serve that patient and should do so safely. But in terms of when regular, routine, preventative dental services will open, we still don't know yet for sure.
And Sarah, if I could add, I can't even begin to count the number of emails and calls from dentists and dental hygienists. I think people should realize that for every dentist that wants to reopen his or her practice for obvious reasons, it's a business. And while it's been open for emergency issues, is actually, Vinny just mentioned, for other forms, it's been discretionary, probably just teeth cleaning and checkups, probably not happening right now. And we're waiting for that to come out in a future guideline. But the passion from hygienists who do not want to go back to work for fear, and I get that. Close proximity to somebody's mouth, while they're always masked and wearing gloves, they probably are as much exposed as somebody in a hospital or a nursing home, close proximity. So I think those guidelines are being explored. We have passed along both to the governor's office, both plans from dentists and national associations that focus on safety, and also the concerns of the hygienists, which there have been a multitude. So still waiting on that to come out, as Vinny mentioned. We'll probably hear something a little more this week. If not in phase 2, probably phase 3.
Terrific. Another question that we've had that perhaps you've already addressed, this is Sarah Lentini from the Greece Regional Chamber again, has to do with nursing homes. I think that there are a lot of people in nursing homes that are probably feeling more isolated than usual. And we certainly have a lot of businesses that are in that space. And the question was, at what point do you envision that people might be able to be visited in nursing homes?
So the challenges associated with nursing homes are significant. That's a pretty obvious statement. The encouraging side is last week, the governor announced a new pilot program to allow visitation at select specifically identified hospitals, which begins the process of expanding visitation in a place where it had previously been restricted. That has not yet happened even on a pilot level for nursing homes. So there is no time frame identified with it. I think this is going to be wholly a sort of factor of how those hospital visitations go, how the virus risk and spread and mitigation continue. But nursing homes are one of the most challenging places to address the virus successfully. And so I wouldn't expect that people are going to be able to go in unrestricted as visitors into nursing homes in the near future. It's not part of a reopening phase. This is a health practice protocol. And so there's no defined time frame for it.
And Sarah, both our spikes recently have been in nursing homes, both in Monroe and Ontario counties. I think in even other outlying counties. So they are, as Vinny mentioned, a huge hotspot right now. We are testing more. We're getting more cases. Not every nursing home resident has to go to a hospital who may have the virus, depending on the symptoms and how they're reacting to it. And then the workers, a lot of people that work in nursing homes are not, paid a lot of money. You have nurses, but you have people at the lower wage levels. And I think right now they're being asked to be tested at least twice per week. The testing, as you probably have seen, is not painful, but it's not exactly the most comfortable thing, as you have a swab up your nose, probably almost touching your brain. And so there's the testing, the constant testing of employees and residents. We're seeing those numbers go up. And one of the things that Vinny and I were on a call every day with the hospital systems and medical leaders, this is probably the number one issue we discuss almost every call.
So can we talk a little bit about process? Because this is great. Thank you so much, both of you, for making yourselves available for this conversation. I think people are hungry for information and guidance. And as you mentioned, it's pretty fluid. Things are changing potentially from day to day, if not minute to minute. But and obviously the website that you cited, I think a couple times, is a great resource. I think the New York State has really done a good job of putting information out there phase by phase. But obviously it can't cover everything, and obviously folks are still going to be wanting information even after today. So what have you thought about, when maybe you have a schedule of ways in which opportunities for people to talk with you? We'd certainly love to have you again, but you may have a schedule that's already quite full. What are the ways in which people can engage with you?
Well, Vinny, I won't speak for you, but calls and emails that start early in the morning and go late at night. You can reach me at the Greater Rochester Chamber of Commerce website. I have an email. Mark Cohen from my team is with me. We answer probably a couple hundred a day. We share a lot of times. Vinny may be the best person to get an answer from. He'll give his own email out. I think we work side by side every day, but we understand the hunger for information. We really do. And we understand what people are going through right now, the uncertainties. We get that. As Vinny's mentioned, I think I mentioned, we don't have all the answers, and the governor doesn't have the answers. People criticize why this is not happening fast enough. When you are in charge of the entire state, and I don't criticize any governor anywhere because they have immense responsibilities. How they reopen is up to them. If they go too fast, they're criticized. Too slow, they're criticized. I think our governor's really trying to go at the right pace. And clearly, the health metrics are the guiding light. He makes adjustments based on those. If the numbers are down, he speeds that up. But we have a lot of nuances, a lot of questions that come in. We try and answer as best we can. And sometimes the best thing we can say is, we don't know. We'll try and find out for you. If we have an answer, we'll tell you. I will not guess and either raise your expectations or lower them. If we don't know, I will tell you that. And in many ways, the governor is still going through all these analytics, probably on a daily basis as he makes his decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we completely understand that you've got a lot of unknowns as you're moving forward. Having said that, we have several questions in the chat box that are specific to phase 2. And I want to give them a little bit of a spotlight. I don't know if you're all seeing them, but with our 2 weeks coming up at the end of this week, what is the outlook on declaring phase two? So, just looking kind of to the immediate future, with an echo from somebody else, and then, a couple of other questions, but let's start with what the timeline looks like.
Yeah, I can jump in. So to be clear, everyone knows, and we said it before, but it's at least
Sorry, guys.
2 weeks between each phase. And this Friday is the earliest phase two could start for our region. I think it's probably safe to say we're cautiously optimistic. Our numbers have been very good, a big picture, for the last few weeks. And, recognizing that those of you who are looking at it closely, you've probably seen our hospitalization numbers have gone up. That's a function of a few unique things related to changes in policy on nursing home discharges. But the good news is the number of people who are sick and being treated for COVID in the hospital has been going down steadily, as have people in the ICU or on ventilators, and our deaths. Those are all very, very good things. I say cautiously optimistic because this is really this week, where we will start to see the impact of the phase one opening. If you followed the pandemic, it's really 7 to 14 days before people contract the virus, where problems start to arise in terms of hotspots or hospitalizations. And so the numbers this week are really going to tell us what has happened since we reopened. To this point, the numbers really show us what happened before reopening. You coincide our phase one reopening with the first sign of nice weather in our region and people getting out and congregating more often than they would have previously. We don't know yet how the virus and the numbers will react in a way to make the decision on phase two definitive yet. It really remains to be seen, but by and large, we're doing very well with it. And we're, again, cautiously optimistic that our region will be able to advance into phase two in the nearer future.
Great. We've got a couple of questions that have to do, there's sort of follow-up to that. So one is, so we in phase two should be potentially ready to go back to work within days of Governor Cuomo's announcement of phase two reopening date. Is that sound about right?
Sarah, if I could add to that, I would suggest this, depending on the industry, one of the things we're suggesting is that if a business can keep workers working remotely successfully, do that. You reduce the density. I mean, you can't build a house remotely. You can't manufacture a package remotely. A lot of things you can. And so we are encouraging every business, if you can work remotely and stay remotely, even beyond the phased reopening, that's great. We have about 50 employees in our chamber. We're going to stay working remotely throughout the summer. We'll make a decision in the fall. We're watching that second wave that they're calling for right now, and the flu season coming in. But by and large, we have operated very effectively. People are not forbidden from coming into work. They come in if they'd like to, but at any given day, we have 3 or 4 people here about 20 yards apart. And that's how we've operated. So I think that's one thing I would say that, to Vinny's point, being cautiously optimistic is really important. But the one thing we don't want is to have a spike and everything comes down to those health metrics. So just being careful, being cautious on this. The face covering CDC guidelines are, if you can't keep 6 feet apart, you have to wear a mask. It doesn't mean if you're out by yourself, you have to wear a mask at all times. Some people do, some don't. If you cannot keep that 6-foot distance, then you should wear one. And I've seen, with few exceptions, people really paying attention to that. And I would say maybe a last word on this. Vinny could attest to it. The collaboration that we have had in this region has been phenomenal. Government leaders, other leaders, from the whole 9-county region. People have worked together so well. The hospital systems, everybody. And I think I'm pretty proud. If you go back in time, the very first region the governor announced to reopen was the Finger Lakes region. And I think since that point, we have worked so well together as a region. We work as a team. We don't fight and argue. We try and do the very best we can. We advocate. We share information. We don't get out in front of ourselves. But I think we're in a great spot, as Vinny mentioned. I think we're on a good trajectory. We want to keep it going. We don't want it to stop. And that's why the 2-week distance is to test and measure. Open, test any new infections. Those numbers are down. Open the next phase. And that's really why the governor chose this route. And I support him 100% on that. It's a smart thing to do.
Yep.
Yeah, and Sarah, there are a couple of direct phase 2 questions I can answer real quick. The safety guidelines will be posted before phase 2 is allowed to open. So you don't have to worry about guessing before you reopen. That heads up could be a pretty short turnaround. It is not impossible that the governor would announce on Thursday that phase 2 can start in our region and post the safety guidelines on Thursday. Doesn't mean your business has to open on Friday. It just means you have the ability to do so. And Bob's point is a very important one. If you can have people continue to work from home, or you can stagger shifts or have fewer employees, you could have your own phased reopening. You don't have to go right back to full 100% with the same number of people. And in fact, that's probably going to be pretty unlikely. So those are things to think about, as you sort of look at this. I know there was another question too about phase 2 having food service with limited capacity. Food service and restaurants are in phase 3. And I can almost assure you there will be capacity reductions even in phase 3. The thing that's being openly discussed is whether or not, in this time of year especially, outdoor dining with capacity restrictions and social distancing could open sooner than phase 3. That's something we're all considering, but there's, again, been no decision on it. So those are just a few more phase 2 questions. The other question I know I can answer directly is regards to testing. There is no cost to anyone to get tested. That was passed by the federal government early on in the pandemic. New York State has led the country and really the world in testing capacity expansion. It's expanded huge even in our region in the last few weeks. Testing is free. If you are showing symptoms, have been near anyone who has been positive, or you are an essential worker or a worker in a phase 1 industry, you are eligible to get a test for free at the MCC drive-in site. I've done it myself. It's incredibly easy. It takes 5 minutes from start to finish. You can sign up online. I encourage anyone who's eligible to do so. All of it helps our region understand how we're doing, how the virus is spreading. It shows how our sort of positive rate is decreasing over time, even though there are more cases we're finding with the increased testing. All of the ways you can do these things, as well as a symptom tracker that is a voluntary program that the county has set up in partnership with the hospital systems in the region to allow people to input every day whether or not you are feeling symptoms, will even allow us to do even more real-time tracking of potential virus spread. So if anyone's interested in participating in that, it's at roccovid.org, and you can sign up and help participate. These are all ways you can help us make sure we get to phase 2 and keep progressing. So sorry, Sarah, just a few questions on there that I saw that I knew we could give direct answers to.
Sir, I saw a question on weddings, which has been a big issue with us. And going back to Vinny's point, the 10-person gathering, I would use that as a barometer. We've had a number of people call about 200-person weddings in June, July, and August. I've always said, I can't tell you to cancel. I would tell you, have a backup plan, because I doubt you have that kind of approval by that time. So there's a lot of wedding venues that certainly are hurting, and a lot of people getting married this year that are making alternate plans. But I would use, up to this point, the governor's guidelines for 10 people. It's a very small wedding. It goes, but it's a sad time for probably one of the best days in people's lives to have that happen this year. But it's just one of the adjustments that we are making. We don't want to have people get their hopes up that maybe in July or August things will change. And one point I try and also reinforce, like with youth sports, the NBA has been canceled, Major League Baseball, the Olympics, March Madness, National Hockey League, the Red Wings. All these major sports enterprises really have been stopped. The governor came out, just said training camps can now start. So this has really impacted such a wide spectrum across the country that it's not just something that's happening in New York State. This is really a nationwide change, and it's a new reality that we're adapting to. So the best I can give you on the weddings is that 10-person limit right now, like the church gatherings and funerals. The one challenge I would say people are having, sometimes venues are not refunding money. We're getting a lot of complaints that people put $10,000 down, they can't get their money back. That's going to be an issue between them and the venue to take up. But I would hope that there be a meeting of the minds, because nobody could predict this, and nobody can really help these circumstances.
I want to clarify, my previous answers about testing were very much so about the diagnostic testing, finding out if you are positive for COVID-19. It is not the antibody testing. I've seen some chatter related to that. Antibody testing is not yet as prevalent in this region or this country, honestly, yet, nor do health officials truly know what antibody testing will mean. So, that's just something to clarify if you don't, just to make sure that wasn't confused with the testing that is happening and New York State is sponsoring.
There he is. Great. Sorry about that, Vinny. I think we
right.
had lost you on camera.
One other question that's been asked a couple of times, concerns, complaints people want to file against businesses that they don't believe are doing the right thing. can be done many ways. Any way you might want to sort of call a local authority. You could always start at the local level. Your town, city government is going to be responsible for most of the enforcement related to code violations or health code. But there is a website, New York State on Pause, that has a complaint form. It can be going to various agencies. If it's an employee-employer issue, it's the Department of Labor. If it's a local code enforcement, it might be that. If it's a bar, the state liquor authority has shut them down and taken their license away. So there's multiple ways to submit complaints about activity that you believe is appropriate, and that'll get sort of delegated to the right authority. So sorry, just answering the
Oh,
ones
that's
I
great.
know I can answer.
No, that's great. I think we have received more than one question that had to do with how to respond to people that are not following the guidelines from folks with a variety of different roles. So thank you for addressing that. One of the things that's really clear is that there are lots of different levels of detail that one could get to in terms of defining what industries fall in what phases. So is that something that as we're moving forward with the phases and the reopening, will additional detail get added under the phases? We talked earlier about spas and hair salons and nail salons and massages and waxing, all sort of being sometimes together, sometimes not, and in that that level of specificity might not be on the website yet. So is that something that we could expect to see more detail on, or kind of looking at you, Vinny,
Yeah.
but maybe I should be asking Bob.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, that's the thing with all of this is you have to follow along probably more closely than you'd like. Bob and I both are very active on Twitter to try to keep people informed of changes so that you don't always have to check the website and know what might have changed. But yeah, there's always more detail coming out on all these things. A couple of weeks ago, we weren't really allowed to even do outdoor recreational activities that were low risk. And then we started to identify what those are. And those things are changing all the time as things are changing and the circumstances are changing within the regions. As of tomorrow, every region except for New York City will have begun reopening. So these are all positive things. The detail is changing every single day. Bob and I both watch the governor's daily briefings every day to stay at the latest changes that might occur because they're happening that quickly and they have been for months.
Right.
Great point, Sarah. The youth sports question, I just want to jump in. I've seen a bunch of those. More clarifications coming. I think somebody's put a question out with training camps starting for pro sports. What about youth sports? I think Vinny and I both played sports our whole life, and I think it's we understand the importance. I think more information forthcoming on that, and we know how important Little League and soccer is for kids. The things that are important, and now is the time people are planning. I've had a lot of emails and inquiries from coaches and organizers, and aside from the 10-person limit to gatherings, I think more things are coming out in the very near future on youth sports.
Oh, that's good to hear. Thank you very much. So we need to stay tuned, listen to the governor's briefings, and also check out the website. What is that web address again? I know it's on our website, folks, by the way. If you go to greasechamber.org, you'll find a link to the New York State site. I'm sure if you go to the Rochester Chamber site, you'll find the same thing. And I know for sure that the Vinny's website at ESD has the same thing, but is it basically newyorkstate.gov?
Forward.newyork.gov.
Forward.newyork.gov. Thank you very much. We had another question that came our way today from somebody who had registered, and I thought it was an interesting question, probably not a very easy question to answer, but given that there's been some violence in Monroe County lately, certainly in downtown Rochester quite recently, and it seems to be a little bit atypical, right? I mean, we certainly have violence in this community, but it almost seems as though suddenly there's a little bit more. Is that a consideration that you're putting into? How are you looking at that? Is that part of what you're talking about? Is there a concern that opening too quickly will lead to more violence, or that opening not quickly enough will lead to more violence? Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sarah, I'll put my hat on and go back to my first career, right? Honestly, we've seen a lot of that. I think, first of all, you see a lot of things happening now with young people. And, young people are often cooped up in a lot of our neighborhoods. You have high densities, families together in small areas. I think that you've taken a lot of things that they usually could do, playgrounds and what have you, have not been open. So I think you just see a lot of frustration. I'm trying to think of myself. If I was 16 or 17 or 18, could my parents keep me in the house? At that point, I might want to go out and hang with my friends. And so there's been some incidents that happened. They've been unfortunate, but I also think it kind of reinforces, in my mind, some of the pressures that everybody feels. I think whether you are a teenager or you're a senior, everywhere in between. I think people are feeling tension, stress, pressure in many ways about their job, their families, their health, what they can and can't do. Overall, I think the mental health issues we have to be very, very mindful of. I don't take these flare-ups. I've seen enough in my career anyway, even absent of the pandemic. But I do think it's kind of a sign of just overall frustration that people are feeling. And as we reopen and get things back, we might not get back to true normalcy in the foreseeable future, but we're getting there pretty quickly. And I think the more we open, we both said today, I think the more confidence people will feel. And it's really it's one step at a time. But I would not read into that. I've seen the videos, and of course now everything is on Facebook in about 5 minutes, so it kind of travels around. But I think it kind of feels that way. I just would add, driving around. I've seen some more erratic driving than I've seen in my previous careers happening. And I think it's just part of
Yeah.
what everybody is feeling. And I think that, to be honest with, I think we all feel that way. Where our lives have changed, the pressures have changed, our work has somewhat changed on this, and we don't get together in meetings. But I think Vinny and I, if we counted the Zoom meetings around every day, we're like you are, Sarah. We're getting pretty good at Zoom. This is a new reality, but I think we communicate differently. We don't see our families as much in close proximity. And so I think it's just, everybody's feeling it, and the longer it goes on, we feel it. But I also think the governor is moving as quickly as he can to get things reopened. So I think we're in a very good trajectory, but we don't want to do what we see in other parts of the country where you have like 500 people, no masks on, close proximity. Those are the things that will drive us backwards.
Yeah. This brings into focus, Sarah, not just the public safety issue, but this is all about personal responsibility. The governor just launched and announced today a winning ad for a Wear a Mask campaign in New York. It's really incredibly well done. And it's about recognizing that if we don't collectively make good personal decisions to help each other stay safe, this will all take longer than we want it to.
Right.
And so it's not about what phase is this and what the governor says about that. He even admits this is about giving New Yorkers information that they can have to make the most appropriate decisions for themselves, which then collectively will benefit all of us. And that's why we appreciate forums like this. I know there are a lot of details that get really confusing and sometimes may even seem or feel inconsistent or ambiguous. That's not the intent. The intent is to try to do this as smart as possible for the greatest number of people to get back to where we want to be, which is living our lives and having an economy that's fully functioning. So, the issues that Bob mentioned, and how groups behave are just emblematic of the risk that we're all under and why it's important for all of us to remain vigilant, recognize that the virus doesn't care if it's a holiday, if it's 80 degrees or 40 degrees. We all have a responsibility.
Well said. Well said, both of you. I thank you both so much for making the time to come and talk to folks. I know that everybody here really appreciates, first of all, the challenging role that you have in trying to navigate the reopening of the region as part of reopening New York State and, of course, the country and the world. But we really appreciate your answering questions, making yourselves available. And I know that people will be reaching out to you with individual questions. If for some reason we didn't answer a question that you put up in the chat box or sent earlier, please feel free to reach out to me, I'm sure you can reach out to Special Advisor to Governor Andrew Cuomo, Bob Duffy, and also to Vinny Esposito, Regional Director of the Regional Division of Empire State Development. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you everybody for joining us here today. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
There you go. All right.
All right.